Hey folks, this is Matt Miller from Ditch That Textbook. Wanted to welcome you to Ditch That Textbook Digital Summit, where we've got educators from all over that are doing amazing things in technology, pedagogy, inquiry, and more. And we're going to be talking about a topic that opinion on one way or the other, and sometimes they are widely differing, and that topic is homework. And it's something that is very near and dear to my heart, as well as the guests that I have with me today. Today we're going to be talking with Alice Keeler. And Alice and I are working on a book together called Ditch That Homework. So you can kind of see where we're coming from on that side of the homework spectrum. So Alice, could you tell everybody kind of who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. I'm Alice Keeler. So I taught high school math for 14 years, and a lot of that I did assign homework, and we can get into that later. I did stop. I have 5 kids. That's probably the most important, is my kids are 12, 11, 9, 6, and 4, and I think they're funny. So I really enjoy my kids a lot. So now I teach at California State University, Fresno, in the teacher credential program, teaching teachers. And of course, I have my blog, AliceKeeler.com, where I share ed tech. What I'm really into, though, is student-centered classrooms and teaching.
Yeah, and that's very much at the heart of what I think we're going to be talking about today, and what our book very much is about. And so, this whole homework thing has been sort of a hot button topic. It seems like everybody has an opinion, whether you're a teacher or a parent or a student or an administrator or somebody who went to school who sort of has an opinion from back then. And so I was just kind of curious to get your take on, why do you think that is? Why do you think everybody has such and intense opinions on homework?
That's definitely it. And I think that we can really boil a lot of it down to that it is our opinions, or it is a lot of it is based on what was done to us and what we liked and what we feel like worked for us. Like, well, I had homework and it was fine. But really understanding is if that was really helpful or just something that we did or persevered through. Honestly, it's a little like you ask people to stop breathing when you mention homework, because it's just so embedded in the culture that we just take for granted that it's something that you do. But then, when you ask, like, why? What research have we read around this? Usually it's really just mostly based on our experiences, parents, teachers, just in general.
Yeah. I've seen the exact same thing, I think, and I think it's really natural for everybody to assume that their experience is the same as everybody else's. And if that's the way that we've done it, then I think there's an awful lot of assumption when it comes into this, wouldn't you say?
Yes, for sure. And I think that you hit the nail on the head when you said, opinion. I hear a lot of I feel. And, honestly, there's a lot of things that I feel that I do when I'm teaching also. And I like to experiment and try new things that may or may not be based on research. I do read a lot of research. I like to go to scholar.google.com and look up articles. And, for example, the responsibility argument. We teach responsibility. And I'm like, well, what measure of responsibility is that? I mean, I took it for granted that homework taught responsibility. So, I go in and I look this up, and I'm looking at research articles. There is no research to support that homework teaches responsibility, but it's so pervasive. We just think that it does. And even in saying, sometimes I'll say to somebody, like, research doesn't support that. It says it doesn't. I'm like, well, I think it does. I don't know a response for that, because it's hard to separate that and to really think, like, what are we teaching? But ultimately what we're teaching as kids, we're not teaching responsibility. That is a soft skill, and that's a great outcome if kids do learn to be responsible. But at the end of the day, what I realize as an algebra teacher, it is my job to teach algebra. And that's all that really matters. Did they learn algebra? And more importantly to me is that they have a passion for it and a love for it. So when I gave kids homework, did that help them to learn algebra? Did it help them to be responsible? Did it help them to, like, get excited about math? Or did I make them cry? And I know for a fact that sometimes, I sent them home to struggle, and I wasn't there to help them. And even though I've been literally one-to-one almost my entire teaching career, like my first semester teaching, I wasn't, but then I inherited the laptop algebra program. So my students have always had computers. And so, kids have a way to communicate with me digitally. And I love when students will like text me, like, oh, can I use a calculator on this? And I get excited when I know that students are working on things outside of class, but I get more excited when kids are working on things outside of class that I didn't ask them to do. Like when I've inspired them and they're so excited about it and they want to do it. That to me is the ultimate compliment. One of my lesson plans is the proof of the quadratic formula by completing the square. And I had eventually moved on to where I stopped assigning homework. So the kids didn't have to do any homework on this, but they would literally go home and teach their mom. They come back like, Miss Keeler, I was showing my mom wait, you were showing your mom the proof of the quadratic formula by completing the square. And if I had sent them home to go and practice and memorize the steps, I'm not sure they would have necessarily been as excited to go and share the link. I mean, obviously I thought it was a good lesson and the kids got into it.
Right.
But do they want to? Are they excited? Am I inspiring learning? Or, there's so many reasons that homework can be a challenge for kids.
Yes, absolutely. No, I totally agree with you on that, and have had experiences myself in a lot of that. And so I was wondering if and you sort of started down this path yourself, I think. So maybe we can kind of circle back to this. Tell me a little bit about your own experience as a student, or experience as a teacher, as a mom, or whatever, with homework, and sort of how it has led you personally, at least, to the place that you are with it.
Yeah, sure. Well, I went to school. I had homework. I remember memorizing the spelling test. I convinced my mom at the book fair if she would get me these. They have pre-prepared papers where you could do your spelling words, that if she bought me that so I could practice my spelling words, that I would practice my spelling words. I was really young, so I guess I wasn't practicing them before, I'm not sure. But my mom would practice with me, and we would do those. So I have some positive and some negative experiences. I really struggled in particular with math. I remember in second grade figuring out that I could stick my homework in my desk, or the assignment, the teacher would hand out a worksheet and I would just stick it in there and just hope that she wouldn't notice. Spent some time in the vice principal's office that year. And, by the time I was in fourth grade and we're doing the time math tests, I'm just putting my head on my desk and I just cry. I just really struggle doing math. And let's understand that my dad is an electrical engineer. My mom has a college degree in Spanish, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom. So, when I'm struggling and crying, my mom would do the flashcards with me. And, my parents really tried to help me. And I really did struggle. I ended up repeating the fourth grade. I never ever pass those timed math tests. And I'll tell you, to this day, you ask me 6 times 8 and I will get anxiety. It's just I have such negative associations towards this, remember things really quickly practice. But I'm, now I'm really good at math. I have a degree in math. I taught math for 14 years. I love to make spreadsheets. I code for fun. And I think I lived in the Fresno State Library when I was in high school. I took advanced classes and we'd have to write research papers. Well, at the time, the internet didn't really exist so much. So I would just go down to the university library and I would do that. And that's fine because my parents could take me and they could pick me up. And I was, in a home environment that doing that I could. But as I started teaching, actually no one told me I had to give homework. I never had a class in my credential program on the theory and practice of homework. And when you look at the lesson design templates, they say independent practice. They don't necessarily say homework. But I just out of habit, I just started assigning homework. Well, the students that I started teaching were students who were unsuccessful. They were remedial math. So I taught a lot of remedial math the first few years, and then we actually phased that out and just said, everyone's taking algebra, whether you can do it or not. So I taught ninth grade algebra for a long time, and the only way to get into ninth grade algebra is to fail eighth grade algebra. And so as you can imagine, students struggle, and they don't necessarily like math, and they don't like my class before they've ever set foot in my classroom day one. So my challenge is, how do I get kids to want to learn, that they're excited, they feel like they understand it and can be successful? And, at some point I just figured out, like, the kids, it doesn't matter what I assign. Some kids will do it and some kids wouldn't. And I could assign one problem, or I could assign 30, and I was assigning 30 problems whether or not they needed it. Everyone got the same thing. So I very rarely see homework being differentiated. And let's be honest, it's just hard. It's just really hard to differentiate homework, and I get that. But does that mean we should be giving everybody the same thing? And so the kids who didn't really need the practice, they got it. They're the ones that did the homework, and the ones who didn't do the homework, they probably needed more practice, but they weren't going to do it. And so I finally, like, why am I doing this? I'm spending so much energy around homework, hassling kids when they walk in the door. Well, my number one job as an educator is really to build relationships with kids, and especially kids who struggle and don't feel confident with the topic. And then I'm just like, where's your homework? And we're talking about homework. We're not talking about learning. We're not talking about really what their strengths, like, you didn't do it. And then I'm calling their parents, and I'm spending time putting it in the grade book, that I'm marking it down, and just how much of my energy am I spending with homework and not about kids and not about learning. When you call parents and you're like, your kid's not doing really well in class, and then the conversation comes around to whether or not they're doing homework, that's not talking about a strategy to help the kid. Like, why are they not understanding it? What can we do to help the child to feel more confident? We're not having those conversations. And we just kind of like allow that to be something that we can dismiss, like, well, they're not doing their homework. So, let's not even bother continuing with other strategies that we could do, because we need to get that down first. But, the truth is that when you don't feel confident, when you don't feel like you're going to be successful, research shows that kids, especially with low self-efficacy, they just kind of shut down. They're like, they would rather do nothing than feel dumb. And they will take that really far, to the point of even possibly being suspended and kicked out of school, because nobody wants to feel dumb.
Right.
So I just stopped assigning it. I'm like, what am I doing? The only people that do it are the ones that don't need it. Let's just get rid of this. And my only consequence was less detention. Like, I stopped having negative interactions with students. And, when I call parents, I'm calling because I'm asking, like, how can, what is your kid struggling with, and what strategies can we use, instead of, like, talking about homework. And then, when I have these more positive relationships, because I'm not hassling kids, I'm able to reach them better. So, a big switch for me, though, is I've always had computers. So I'm teaching differently. I use technology to allow me to capture more time in class. The most valuable thing that I can do is sit next to a kid. And talking at kids doesn't, sometimes it's too easy for some, too hard for others. And, the definition of insanity is to do the same thing over again, expect different results. So when the kids didn't understand the homework, and they come in and we spend 15 minutes going over the homework, and I go over it the same way that I taught it, how effective is that? Could I be using that time in better ways? So, like, how much homework a day should each kid really be spending? And the truth is, sometimes they spend a lot more than we anticipate. I think it's only going to take them 15, 20 minutes. They end up spending 45 minutes to 3 hours. I don't know how much time they're going to spend, and I'm not there to monitor it. But, in theory, they should be spending about 20 minutes. Well, if I don't talk about homework, I don't go over homework, I don't collect homework, I don't do anything with homework, that's a lot of classroom time that I just capture back for them to do the independent practice, because independent practice is important. And then that I can actually work with them and see if they're struggling and kind of target that. And then you ask me about my mom, and I see my kids crying. That's it. They're frustrated. Very oftentimes the instructions are poor, and we're trying to sit here and figure it out together. And I have a college degree, and I went to school, and I get how the system works. And sometimes I look at this stuff and I think, okay, like, I can help my kid with this, but how many parents can't?
Right. And we are in such a fortunate position as teachers where we have a little bit of that understanding and we can go help our kids. And something that you said earlier, I'm trying to remember. Oh, it's gone. I don't know. I'm feeling awfully scatterbrained with all of this right now, but
this is my number one reason, and I really could probably we could retitle our book to 50 reasons why homework's not necessary. Right. But my number one reason is equity. So I have a degree in math. My son in 3rd grade comes to me and says, Mom, I don't understand my math homework. We're doing the commutative and the associative property. Well, he goes to school where it is pretty close to 100% free and reduced lunch, and a large migrant population where parents don't necessarily speak English, a lot of Spanish speakers. And so how many of the other 29 parents could help their kid? Like, that's associative and commutative property. I've asked a lot of parents, and they're even just in my circles, people who are teachers. You remember the associative property? Like, no. And so we're putting parents in a situation where they potentially are just feeling helpless. They can't help their kid, but they want to. And they feel dumb. I don't know how to do 3rd grade math. Some of the research shows in particular, when the parents don't speak English, it can be really shameful because they want to help their kid and they don't know how. They don't necessarily know how the school system works. But then, of course, I try to start showing my son how to do it, and he's arguing with me. Like, that's not how my teacher does it. I don't get this. And I am fighting with my kid. And I'm just going to tell you, I'm over that. I'm over fighting with my kid over things that I didn't. Yeah, I'll fight with him over the dishwasher and cleaning the room. That's right. Doing. Like, I don't want stress in my house. And I don't want to fight over things that I like.
No, I can totally sympathize with that. And I'm even starting to get some of that as a dad too. As my kids start to get older, I've got, a daughter in 5th grade, a daughter in 3rd grade, and a son in 1st grade. And as my oldest daughter is starting to get older, she's pretty bright and she catches on to a lot of things, but teachers do things differently, and sometimes it's hard for kids to be able to see that there are a couple of different ways to do things. So I'm glad that you bring that up. Now, I was wanting to kind of switch bases a little bit because we've touched on this just a little bit, and I know between the two of us, as we've been working on this book, we've run across some of the research that there is about homework. And so I was thinking maybe we could go over some of the things that we've found, because I think it's good to bring it back to this sometimes. And I've even found that with some of the research, some of it is sort of counterintuitive. It's like kind of like the opposite of what I might expect. So maybe you can give me some of the things that you've found, and I can do the same if you want.
I don't have any of it sitting in front of me right now. So.
Right. Yeah, we'll just summarize.
Homework research in particular is very tricky because there's a lot of it that's correlational. As many of us know, have taken a statistics class. Correlation does not indicate causation. So I've done this. I've run the math. The kids who did their homework did better on the test. Does that mean homework was the cause? So when I stopped giving homework, hey, guess what? Those same kids did better on the test. There's a lot of qualities and reasons that go into that. So I'm very skeptical of causal research, and so I definitely on the lookout for that. But even when I look at research that looks at cause and effect, like if they did their homework, they did better on the test than if they didn't. The amount of difference that it makes, the percent, is very low. I've read in one research article so usually what you'll see is in the research, there's really no difference in elementary school, and there's some difference starting in middle school and into high school. Some.
Okay? Yeah.
Well, does that, and then what the article usually completely leaves out is the stress, the fighting, the dropout rate. I mean, there is a correlation with homework completion and kids dropping out of school, and I don't, and it's like you get a research study that says if you sing in your car, you're less likely to get in a car accident. It doesn't mean if you start singing that you're going to be safer in your car. I mean, those people have a different characteristics. It's not necessarily cause and effect. So just them doing their homework probably wouldn't, I mean, their grades might go up if you're counting homework, but it doesn't necessarily increase their learning. But so again, what I've saw is it says about 2%. So in math in particular is what I usually say. Math in particular, homework is helpful. And the number I quantify is there is about 2%. It's like 2%. Is that worth the stress, the fighting, the amount of time that we spend going over it? There's homework's not, homework, excuse me, but test scores and those things are not the end all be all. There's other things as just being healthy. If we look at research, what else is important? Sleep. Sleep is super important. I bet you sleep is probably more important, and I don't have a research study on that.
Right. That's okay. Yeah.
I bet you going to bed on time and being real well rested and eating breakfast has a higher influence than whether or not they did their homework.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. And you were just talking about a couple different things, and one of them that tied back into test scores. And the thing that always sort of strikes me about some of this research, I think you were touching on this a little bit, was that it's like, what is it exactly that we're measuring? And if we're trying to measure the effect that homework has on overall test scores, like standardized test scores, I have an awful lot of doubts about standardized tests in the first place and what they measure and their effectiveness and all of that. And so it's kind of like, are we measuring the right thing? It's like, if we're trying to figure out if we're trying to weigh a cow and we're trying to use a tape measure to weigh a cow, it's like, is that a really good way to weigh a cow? Not exactly. That's not a very good analogy. It's all that I could come up with off the top of my head. But yeah, it's like there's so many kind of like dubious ways that either the research is done or what its end goal is. And I don't know about you, but the end goal for me is to have kids turn into good, well-rounded human beings,
right,
and not necessarily being able to bubble in the correct answers on their standardized tests.
I couldn't agree more. I feel that there's more to life. There's more we're trying to get out of it. And so part of my question is, does homework inspire kids to love learning? And a lot of times, and there's research that says it doesn't, forcing kids to do reading logs and doing the math homework, it makes them hate school. Some kids' homework makes them hate school, that feels like the opposite of my job. I want them to love to learn. And again, it comes, what's really hard is to write clear directions. I have far from mastered that skill. When I'm in class and I tell students to do something, and then it's like, wait, I don't understand what we're doing here. But then then I send them home with directions to do stuff, and I'm not there to explain it. And I've seen that in my own family. My kid comes home and she's got something to do. And first of all, the X and Y axis was flipped on one particular activity. So my daughter is spending all this time trying to figure out this activity, and the directions, there was errors. There was typos on it. And if that was in class, the teacher would have walked over and be like, oh my gosh. I mean, they would have instantly realized and just said, hey, everybody, we got to regroup here or do something else. But when you send something home and has a typo, or everyone reads things or comes at it with a different lens. So even if some people were able to figure it out and it was clear to them, it's not going to be clear to everybody. And you're not there to, support it.
Yeah.
And then the kids are fighting with their parents. And there is definitely research that shows that homework causes severe stress and family fighting. And I think you just have to go take a quick look at Facebook to support that.
Yeah.
That's anecdotal, but I remember seeing a parent post, my daughter's second grade homework is causing me to drink.
Right.
And I hardly talk to a parent that doesn't have some sort of a horror story about the stress that homework inflicts on a family. And I can't even count how many times I've gone over to somebody's house for dinner and the kid's not at dinner with us. They're upstairs doing homework.
Yeah. Yep. You're right. And if you think about what we do in our own, even in sort of like the professional world, if you think about, there are some professions where people will work on things at home, but the idea of go in and work for your workday and then come home and continue to work at home, there's no good connection there to the real world, I don't think. So,
sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Finish that connection is what percent of work should a kid do compared to an adult? And so they're at school for 7 hours. How many hours does an adult work, and what percent of that should a kid be working? And I know most people I know, adults, aren't doing work Saturdays, Sundays. They are not doing work from their job every single day. And if they are, we call them workaholics, and it's not healthy.
Yeah. Yeah. You're exactly right. Yeah. Okay. So, okay. So we got some good stuff there, I think, about research and then other things that we got into. I want to kind of change gears just a little bit here, because one of the things that we really wanted to do as we're continuing to write this book is to offer practical strategies and solutions to teachers. So it's not so much like trying to talk about why homework is the devil and why, all of the research shows that it's bad, because that only goes so far to actually help teachers. So I know one of the things that we really want to do is to provide something that's practical and provide strategies to teachers that that will allow them to create the kind of classes that rely less on the homework, or that don't need the homework, because we're able to accomplish what we want to do in class. And so let me throw that over to you real quick. And what are maybe one or two things off the top of your head that you can think of that we can either start doing in class or put more emphasis on in class so that we don't need that homework so much?
Well, I'll say the first is that we should call it independent practice and not call it homework. Let's just,
okay. Yeah, I like that.
I think we can all agree independent practice is important. You just watch somebody do something. What percent of that do you remember? In fact, looking at the little triangle, I think most of us are familiar with this. You learn best by teaching others. So I'm super into peer evaluation. So my first is, let's just call it independent practice, call it what it is. And if we can get independent practice in during class, then it's done. So if we say the word homework, it assumes that things need to be done at home, like the home is magical. Doing things at home, location doesn't make something, magical. Is not the learning. It's the practice. So I'll start with that one. I'll let you go next.
Okay. Let's see. One thing that I think we can do is rethink the way that we get our practice in. Because I know so often, it's really easy to make photocopies of a worksheet, hand it out to kids, have them take home questions 1 through 30, do the odd ones, come back. And then by the time that they come back the next day, they will have practiced, or maybe sort of practiced, those 15 questions. And if they're doing them incorrectly while they're at home, then they're basically creating bad habits. But if they do them correctly at home, and after we've done, a handful of them, then at some point it becomes unnecessary repetition. And it just seems like it's such an inefficient way to get that practice in. And so what I think we can do better is we can come up with maybe more structured practice that gives better feedback. And I think we can really do this well in the classroom. One of my favorite examples is to use some sort of a formative assessment tool. So many people are using Kahoot right now. I love quizzes also. And so you've got some of these. Kahoot is great for this in this way, that if we will put some of those questions up on a Kahoot game, and it shows the question, it shows the possible answers, and the students answer the question, then immediately the answer goes up on the screen.
Right.
After they've all answered. And that gives the teacher the perfect opportunity to look at that instant feedback and see how many of the kids got the correct answer, how many of them got these wrong answers. And then if all of them are on B, but the answer was D, then they can say, okay, here's why B isn't the right answer. Here's why D is the right answer. Give them some of that targeted specific feedback, and then they're able to move on. And then once they're done with that game, they can even go back and take it again and see, did it finally sink in, or maybe take it again the next day. So I think the way that we provide that feedback, that's the kind of meaningful, right in time feedback that you can get while kids are still cognitively wrestling with those problems. Whereas if you give a kid a homework assignment, you collect it the next day in class. Even if you're able to grade it that night and give it back to him the next day, that's like almost 48 hours between the time it was assigned and the time the feedback was given. And I think that's just entirely too long these days.
Well, just this mental idea that you're done with something, you're just not going to take in as much. And so when you give feedback after a student thinks that they're done, they're not going to learn as much from it as if they give it to a while. As you said, they're still mentally struggling through it. So, when I have students, they're doing some math problems, they're finished with problem number 2, and they're working on problem number 3, and I go over to them, I'm like, oh, can I help you with problem number 2? Is that kid excited about it? Not really.
No.
Because he's working on number 3. He's like, done. He's done with number, like, why are you talking about number 2? I'm done with that. And so if you think about when a kid's done a whole section of work and then then I'm done with my homework. As soon as they think that, we're shutting down the learning, right?
Yes.
And so they come in and it's like, let's go over the homework. Like, I'm done with the homework. What are you talking about? Like, how much learning is really coming out of this? I'm not getting as much bang for my buck as in this, what you just said, where you're getting that immediate feedback one by one. So I come back to a saying, if the computer can grade it, it should.
Right.
So DOK1 and DOK2 tests, if it has an answer, let's let the computer do this. I mean, even if you send it home for homework, which again is an equity issue, let's not even go there.
Right.
But kids should get immediate feedback per question, so they don't practice doing it wrong. So that when you do go over it with them, I mean, they're really interested in it because they have more to do. Like they're still thinking about it. They're in the middle of it. As much as you can get feedback in the middle of the process, which is literally impossible when there's one of you, 30 of them, or as a high school teacher, one of me and 150 of them.
Mm-hmm.
Just do the math on that. If I spend 1 minute giving, how high of quality feedback can I give to students in 1 minute?
Mm-hmm.
But if I have 150 students, I can't give really super high quality feedback. And so that just using technology to offload some of that responsibility where the independent practice gets immediate feedback on it.
Yeah. That's like
be graded.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's a perfect example of one of the things I keep coming back to as I think through, what we can write about this book. And, just as I'm kind of working through all of this, I keep coming back to what are the ways that we can be more effective and efficient so that we don't need it. And there was something we were talking about the other day. I think about, and this is something that we've already sort of touched on a little bit. I think about the time that we put into homework. It's like if we put a certain amount of time into homework, but we only get so much out of it, I don't feel like that's a good return on the investment that we made in the time that we put into it. Because if we put 60 minutes worth of work into something, we should get 60 minutes worth of return, whatever that looks like. But if we're putting all of this effort into it and we're getting very minimal gains, like the 2% that you were talking about earlier, if a business was working off of that same premise, that business would quit that practice or would be out of business pretty quickly.
Well, look at Google and other products, things that people use, they get rid of it because it's not used enough. It doesn't have enough return. You'll see stores will do that. Exactly what you said. Mm-hmm. Is it worth, for the amount of learning that comes out of it, is it worth the amount of stress, the amount of time, the amount of effort that we spend on that? And can we use our efforts differently that we get more bang for your buck?
Yes, exactly. Okay, so another one that I know that you're passionate about is the idea of the student-centered classroom. And if we think about whenever things are so teacher-centered, then obviously the emphasis is on the teacher and there's less on the student. And when the student really feels ownership, obviously they're going to get so much more out of it. So I think it's safe for us to say that the more student-centered we can make our classes, the more effective the learning is, the less need for homework. So I wanted to see if you had any ideas for ways that we could create a little bit more of that student-centered environment.
Well, the first is why did we have teacher-centered environments versus what we call, a student-centered environment? It again was the one of me and the 30 of them, and how do they access information? The first is just thinking that kids access information differently today. When's the last time you were in a social situation that someone didn't look something up? My son's science fair project, I got him one of these Google Homes. Looks like a little vase, and you just
I want one of those. Yes.
Questions. And so we're looking at does Google Home make worksheets obsolete? I mean, so like it's in the kitchen and we're at the dinner table and literally my kids will just shout out questions. Okay, Google. And then they'll just shout out random math problems or they'll ask, I don't know, this is amusing to them. But we're accessing information in different ways. I mean, I literally have Google in my pocket, right? Like I'm just standing here and I just ask, let me see if I can make this work. Probably it doesn't even want to turn on.
This is live video, people. We're going to see if it works.
What is y equals 12x squared minus 7x plus 5? Yes. You see it?
Oh, there's the graph. Oh,
Graph.
that is unbelievable.
I send my students home to graph, I don't know, I assigned 20 of them. I don't remember what I did. Like, and how long did that take them? And I literally can just ask the universe. It comes to me. So how we access information is differently. Name one kid who hasn't looked stuff up on the internet. Like, come on. And so what needs to come out of my mouth? What do I need to tell kids? What do I need to say to them? And I would argue that in an age of information and technology, that it's different. I don't have to tell kids, you know, here's the procedural steps of what to do, whether it be just physical motion around the room or the procedural steps to do a math problem. And so I like to say, use my words to encourage students and increase critical thinking.
I love that.
And so, you know, when I'm talking about switching to a student-centered classroom, we start with the student. What is the student doing? So as I design my lesson plans, I don't use the word teacher is. You know, obviously I'm doing something, but I'm always trying to reframe it from the perspective of the student, and that, you know, note-taking, just literally straight up copying is DOK 0. I'm not talking about summarizing. I'm talking about copying is DOK 0. So starting a lesson where we go over the homework, they're watching me, students aren't thinking. You know, and then I copy down a problem and they copy it, students aren't thinking. We do guided practice. They're doing a little bit of thinking, but still I'm doing most of thinking for them. And so really just trying to switch that up where we have I like to have students work in small groups, and that I ask them questions and they look it up and we ask them to do something that, so each student is actively engaged the whole time. Like the student should be doing something and they should be thinking about something the whole time. They should be making some decisions. I'm really big into that. So when you just create a lesson, what decision is the student going to make? And what information is the student going to look up? So those are 2 questions that I ask now that I never asked when I first started teaching.
Right. Yeah. And it's so frustrating. I've seen, I know that we've both talked about this to some extent. It's so frustrating when we try to, this again goes back to the big shift that we've got to make, I think, in schools, is that when we try to teach as if Google doesn't exist or as if YouTube doesn't exist, because it is out there, it is in our pockets, it's something that isn't going away. I mean, the search engine and the enormous video collection and the, you know, basically reach out into the atmosphere and grab a piece of information, it's not going anywhere.
But look,
so
that's already become obsolete-ish. The machine learning that Google and other companies are doing is incredible. Like,
yeah,
a lot of these rote things and things we need to remember, like Google Drive right now just tries to predict what documents you want before you even opened it. And have you seen the new Explore feature on Google Slides?
Mm-hmm.
So it reads your slide and it says, you know, this would be a design layout that would go well with the content that you have. It's not just suggesting layouts, like it's thinking about your layouts.
Yeah.
And so it's, you know, switching away, like how does that reality impact what kids are doing in class? How are they creating? How are they being problem solvers? Jobs of the future are not working in factories. I think we can all agree they're, you know, a lot of them have gone to China. And so, you know, the real skill set is being able to figure out when something goes wrong. So I would say, this is kind of off topic, maybe a lot off topic, when the internet's not, or your technology is not working, yes.
Okay.
You know, that's an opportunity to troubleshoot and to think, because it's the problem solving strategies that are really so important for kids. And so opening up more opportunities for kids to be thinking rather than having to spend their time remembering.
Right. Yes. I love that. That's great. And I mean, how many times do teachers like totally fear the moment when the technology doesn't work? And it's like, that's a cause for, oh no, I have to fix it. I have to go figure out what's going on. But like you said, instead that could be there's problem solving all over that. And B, it really does test what's in our brains. So I really like that. Now, to move on to maybe our last topic of discussion here, and talking about that kind of classroom where we don't have that reliance on homework, where we don't have the need for it, because we become more efficient, more effective in the classroom. I know that digital tools do play a huge impact on that. And I know that sometimes people get frustrated because they think that, yeah, that it's like, oh, that technology is supposed to be the silver bullet that's going to cure all of our educational woes. And it's not, but it really does allow us to do so much more and to leverage our time. And it really does put an awful lot in our hands. And so I was wondering, just wanted to throw that idea out to you. What are some ways that you think just technology in general, and we've talked about some of them already, but some ways that can impact our effectiveness in the class so that we won't need that homework?
Well, feedback has a huge impact on learning. So
yes.
feedback and things that can do it. And I think peer feedback is so powerful. And that's not necessarily a technology tool, but technology allows me to share it to more students in the class. So where maybe I hand my paper to the one student next to me and he kind of scribbles on there, and then I got to figure out how to get that back to the teacher to do those, is I like to have all the students on the same Google Slides where every student adds one slide to the same one, because then they're able to see what everybody's doing and do peer feedback. So let me describe this activity if I can. I create a blank Google Slides, so I don't type anything on them. Then I ask the students to do something. So I asked one class, I wanted them to write a paragraph using figurative language. And they write their paragraph. Everyone adds a slide doing that. So what I do as a teacher is I scan the room. Like, oh, are those hot Cheetos? Do you need some help? Do you need some help getting started? Like just kind of getting everybody on task, right? So I'm scanning the room, seeing that everyone's getting onto the slides. And then I go take my chair and I physically sit next to a kid. And we go, we go over to their paragraph, like, what do we need to do to get started? And I give them some feedback, and maybe I talk a little too loud so some other students near me can hear, right? And then I take my chair and I go sit next to another student, and I give that student direct help and direct feedback right then. And then I stand up and I go back to my computer and I stay standing up. And on one slide, I'm going to insert a feedback comment. It puts a little like Post-it note on the side. And I just, and short, don't write a paragraph. No one's going to read it. Just like, you need a simile. Done. Or just write the word simile needed. Like, shorter is better. And then I go to another slide and I do the same thing. I insert a feedback comment. So 2. Now think about this. If I were to go through and give a feedback comment to every single student during a class period, there's literally not enough minutes.
No.
So I'm trying to do that. All right. So then repeat, scan the room. Okay. Oh, back with the hot Cheetos. Like, do you need some help getting on task? What's going on here? I see that you're, kind of messing around in your bag. And like, all right, get everybody going. And then I pick up my chair and I go sit next to a different kid. And I give that kid some specific feedback and some encouragement. And I pick up my kid and I go my chair and I go, don't pick up the kid. Pick up the chair and I go sit next to another kid, give them some specific feedback, run back to my computer, enter 2 short feedback comments. Now who sees those comments? Everybody.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. We are all on the same Google Slides, so everyone can see everybody's slides. So when I insert feedback comments, everyone's able to see those, like, oh, I don't have a simile on mine either. Right. But then I asked students specifically that they would go and this is the culture of our classroom. We're a community of learners and we help each other get better. So I want students to go to another slide as an expectation that they will give students high quality feedback. You have to teach them how to do that.
Right. You do. Yes.
You'll get a lot of good job. And I also like the Raiders. I live in California.
My favorite is the 1-letter comments.
Yeah.
Where you'll get K.
Yep, exactly.
That drives me crazy.
So, investing the time in teaching kids how to give high quality feedback. So one of the things that I like to say is you're going to get immediate feedback. You may not just might not get it from me. So there, what can I do on the computer that gives them immediate feedback? And there's so many websites that will do that, right? You could use Kahoot, GoFormative, quizzes. We named several of them, and then we could go a million miles deeper, right? And then there's the peer feedback. It's an expectation that you don't turn something in without getting peer feedback. You're going to get immediate feedback somehow on what you're doing. And then, that allows me to spend my time focusing on critical thinking.
Yep, exactly. And that's the stuff that we as teachers are positioned to do. Whereas if it's the real low level, repetitive stuff like the grading of the, you know, the stuff that you can outsource to the computer. Like you said, we're putting ourselves in the position to do something that we're highly qualified to do that the computer can't. And if the computer can do it, and then we should let it.
That's my stance.
Yes, yes, I love it. That's great.
Value is encouraging students and increasing their critical thinking. So how can you restructure your class to allow you to spend more time doing that and have this? My other question is, how many minutes is every individual student talking? You know, when I throw out a question to the whole class, I get to hear from what? 1, 2, maybe 3, and always the same 2 or 3. So when I put a question out there digitally, like in Google Classroom, I click plus, create assignment, and I type it, and I push ask. So super easy. But in that moment, everyone gets to think.
Yeah, yeah.
Every student gets to think, and they put their answer. And while we may have a whole class discussion, we first have some wait time to let every student think, and then you enable it so the students can see each other's responses, and then you hear from everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that is the biggest deal. You hear from everybody rather than 1 or 2 students.
Yeah, and so now it's not possible to just mentally check out and just sit at your desk. In this case, everybody's got something to do. It's like everybody's involved. That's the student-centered classroom. That's what we've been talking about, right? Yes. All right.
Everybody's thinking. I now know which students that I also want to question further and to work with. And so I think the biggest thing that tech does, and this is a non-negotiable for me, collect data.
Yes. Yes. Love it.
I can do stuff with that. And that's how I change what I do, that I'm more responsive to what students need me to do rather than what I think they need me to do.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Very good. Very good. This has been awesome. All right. So to kind of land this plane and wrap this up, we were just talking about digital tools, and Alice, you've created a number of resources regarding using digital tools in the classroom, but I thought you might throw in a little plug about 2 particular ones that tie into a digital tool that Google has created for the classroom that you and I hold near and dear to our hearts. You got something you can tell us about that?
Self-promotion.
Yes.
So I co-wrote this book, 50 Things You Can Do with Google Classroom, with Dr. Libby Miller. She's super awesome. And then Libby and I both have a real passion for student-centered classroom. So this is our first book, and it's really very basic of what can you do with Google Classroom. It just gets you started. But as we were thinking about how we could take that further, so this is 50 things to go further, but we really wanted to focus on having a student-centered approach. So, you know, how do we leverage a tool like Google Classroom to put students at the center of the learning rather than just as a way to throw all our stuff online, which, by the way, that's hard and confusing. What do you do with all that stuff?
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully this book would be helpful. And then, of course, Matt and I have a book coming out, hopefully soon.
Yes. Yes, that's right. And so that one we're currently working on. It's going to be called Ditch That Homework. Also published by Dave Burgess Consulting, who published my book, Ditch That Textbook, and Alice and Libby's books. And so if anybody's interested in that, we're going to be sharing some email updates from time to time, and also asking for people's stories and their experiences with homework and their strategies for how to rely on it less. And so if anybody's interested in doing that, the place to go is, surprise, surprise, ditchthathomework.com. And so if you head over there, that'll let you get on that email list so that you'll know everything that's going on. You'll get a little bit of behind the scenes too about what Alice and I are up to. And you'll be able to give us your stuff so that you may end up in the book also. So, and I know that's something that we're both pretty excited about, is getting like the real voices and the real experiences and strategies of teachers into this book, right?
Exactly.
Yes, very good. All right. Hey, this has been awesome. Alice, thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us for the Ditch That Textbook Digital Summit. We'll see you next time.
Bye.